Okay, so there's some laundry going on. There's a thunderstorm going on, but we're going to talk about books because it is halfway through the month of March, and I have, I think, 9 books that I want to talk about. Now, they are about as different and diverse, and I don't know that there's anybody else on this planet that would choose to read these particular 9 books. This is just the way I roll. However, as always, I will hold them up for you or put a picture and tell you what I think. You can feel free to scroll along to the ones that interest you. Now, first off, I'm going to talk about Demon Copperhead. I actually listened to this on audiobook in February and then forgot because it had been an audiobook that I had listened to in the car and wasn't in front of me to do the review. If you do happen to watch my channel and return, thank you so much for being here. You may know I'm not a huge fan of Dickens, and I undertook David Copperfield in October for Victober, and I liked it better than I thought I was going to. I did not love it. I did not think, oh, my opinions of Dickens have changed, but I appreciated it. I thought it was very in a line with classics. I thought it was a little drawn out, a little Dickens-esque. I'm still not a huge fan. Neither am I a fan of Barbara Kingsolver. I have read at least 3 of her books and I do not hate them, but she's not really been the author for me. So when Demon Copperhead came up and started getting all this buzz, did I want to read it? I mean, yes, especially if it had not been tied into a classic, I would have passed. But because it was supposed to reflect David Copperfield, which I was interested in trying Dickens and another Dickens, and that one was one that I wanted to, I said, okay. So we read David Copperfield, then David Copperhead. I listened to the audiobook in February, and I really love it, y'all. I did. I thought, but here's my viewpoints on it to help you if you have yet to go down this hype train. What I really most appreciated about Demon Copperhead was, in fact, its very, in my opinion, great parallel to David Copperfield. Having still been refreshed and remembering it, I felt like the names were very similar. You know, you had names that you would kind of think to yourself, oh, this is that character, this is that scene, this is the modern day version, you know. And she would deal with like the opioid crisis, but in Dickens it would be alcoholism, you know, that kind of thing. So she would expand, she would update, modernize, but it was some of the same kind of things. I particularly enjoyed David Copperfield's / Demon Copperhead's kind of love interest and romantic upbringing and switching around in the drama. That was very much in David Copperfield. Really translated, I thought, into the teenage angst in a very gritty, raw way. And I thought it was really an enjoyable ride. And that's what I really appreciated, enjoyed about it. And I kept waiting, anticipating, like, how is this next part going to play out? And then I was kind of surprised, intrigued, and entertained. So I'm going to say that if you are familiar with the original, that you will even more appreciate Demon Copperhead. However, I have many, many friends who read that as their, you know, book before. They've never read Dickens, and they really liked it. So it's basically a very, very exceedingly poor boy who has a lot against him and tries to rise above society to try to make his way in the world. And every time there could be bad luck, you know, that kind of, if I didn't have bad luck, I'd have no luck at all kind of situation. That's Demon Copperhead. And the beautiful thing about the character is that he doesn't let that like end him or hold him down or hold him back from trying again. He's just like, well, there it is again. I'm squashed like the flea on the dog, you know. And then it's like, let's just see what's around the next corner. You know, it's like that kind of, and it's that very much that kind of, not really hillbilly, but less educated, very street smart, but not necessarily have all the advantages of higher education smart. So it's a pretty heartfelt, lovable character. So anyway, that's what I want to say about that. I felt like it deserved a little bit fuller review since I was pretty skeptical, to be honest, going into it, not being a fan of either of those two authors. Next, I want to talk about my middle grade March. I've only read 2 so far, which is, kind of a shame since it's pretty easy to get through middle grade, but the ones I've read have been exceedingly excellent. So, Roxie and the Hooligans, Phyllis Reynolds Naylor. This book is the story of a little girl who she's being bullied, and she's very smart and kind of nerdy, and then you have the in crowd that's kind of picking on her for particularly her bigger ears, and they all get themselves into a little situation pickle, and Roxie kind of is the one who's brave and saves the day and shows them who she really is, and they go on to develop a sweet new kind of relationship to one another, and it's just lovely and heartwarming, and I love it, and I want to read more of that author for sure. I also read Pack's Journey Home. This is by Sara Pennypacker, and look at this cover, just so pretty. So this is the sequel. It's a duology story. Pax is the first one, Pack's Journey Home is the second one. A little boy who has lost his parents and saves a fox who is orphaned and raises it, needs to release it back because it is a wild animal, even though he has mostly domesticated it. And there's also the sidebar of the forestation and water controls of new neighborhoods and businesses moving into what was a pristine wildlife area, and so you kind of have those kind of things, and it's told by the perspective of both the boy and the fox. So if you're okay with animal language, I think this is spot on and just so good. I think the way she was really not talking down, but talking fully and getting even a young reader to wrestle with loneliness, with grief, right? Because he's dealing with the loss of his parents. Just the way those heavy topics, of balancing nature versus man's needs, all these things, very pretty adult topics, but dealt with so beautifully. I would absolutely recommend this for the middle grade reader. Just beautiful book, Pack's Journey Home. Moving on to my classics, I did read Henry James' Daisy Miller, very short little book. I thought this was going to be a fierce female character, but I'm not so sure she's that fierce as just kind of selfish and a little manipulative. It's an American woman, goes over to Europe, and basically uses her feminine charms and sexuality to get her way and get what she wants, and kind of just go forward. It's short, so I don't want to give away too much of the plot. So that's basically the setup for the book. You've got a man who really falls head over heels for her and is trying to woo her, and there's a couple little sidebar actions, and then the end makes it very typical classic style writing. And I do really appreciate Henry James's writing, and I do really look forward to reading more of his, particularly the Portrait of a Lady. So that wasn't necessarily my fierce character that I was looking for, but it was a good classic. Then I read Odepus the King by Sophocles. This was another little short book I just thought I'd pick up that is a play, and I knew that I knew this story, but I couldn't really remember which one it was, right? And I got really into the Metamorphosis that I read last month, and so I kind of wanted just to continue that vein, kind of refreshing myself with the Greek and Roman classics. So this is the story of the boy who grows up, and there's a prophecy that the son is going to kill the king, and so they basically ship off the son so that this can't come to pass. But of course then the son doesn't realize the encounter of his father and ends up killing him, fulfilling the prophecy, and coming down to all other kinds of bad oracles and mojo and Greek tragedy galore. So it kind of came back to me as I was reading it. I really enjoyed having it again firsthand, and I think it's great to revisit some of those, because a lot of our modern day novels, even if they're not directly trying to tie into it, I think we're influenced by some of these famous stories that we hear in different ways growing up and in society. Now, since I was on that kind of kick of classics and myth, I went ahead and picked up Ulysses by James Joyce. This is all one day in the life of a gentleman who is going along, and each chapter section is kind of loosely tied to the Odyssey characters. And so I thought, great, this is going to be a perfect time to pick this up when I'm on this kind of mindset and mojo. And I got to section 3. I don't know how many sections there are, maybe 8 or 9. So I got to section 3, and I didn't understand what I was reading. And then I went and got a Spark Notes or Cliff Notes, and I was like, okay. I just didn't feel like it was worth the effort to try to wrap my brain around it. But the language is really beautiful. I'll read just a few lines. He went down the house staircase. Who the deuce scrawled over these walls with matches? Looks as if they did it for a bet. Heavy, greasy smell there always in those works. Lukewarm glue in Tom's next door when I was there. He took out his handkerchief to dab his nose. Citron lemon? Ah, the soap I put there. Loose it out of that pocket. Put it back his handkerchief. He took out the soap and stowed it away, buttoned into the hip pocket of his trousers. What perfume does your wife use? I could go home still, tram, something I forgot, just to see before dressing. No. Here. No. A sudden screech of laughter came from the Evening Telegraph office. Who knows that is? What's up? Pop in a minute to phone. Ned Lambert it is. He enters softly. So that's the kind of writing. So it's almost a pure poem, that stream of consciousness. You can get images, and some of them are really striking or interesting, but if you're trying to follow the picture in your mind, in my mind, it's really jumbled. It's really mostly a hot mess. And then I'm spending more time trying to unhot mess it than I am just enjoying being in the world, if that makes sense. But I can appreciate the book for what it is, and I'm not going to get rid of this book. I might pick it back up again later and just kind of enjoy being in that world, but not necessarily even understanding it for a story, if that makes sense. Now, my nonfiction that actually was a carryover from February, because it took me quite a while to read, was Cornelius Vanderbilt by TL Stiles. So this was a nonfiction book that was the story of the first or greatest American early tycoon, who basically started out with the steamboat and was really heavy into transporting things. Basically made San Francisco, because the waterway around the continent, like down to Panama and Nicaragua and coming across to San Francisco, because there was no roads or railroads or planes or any of that going on to get you across the country in those days, right? So that was, when the gold rush particularly happened and everybody was needing to go over because the land is literally giving up money. Everybody's heading over to the other part. So that started out. Then he got involved in all the railroads and the transportation in general, and just investing against things, and not always nice. Like, most people, I do not think, liked this man. I do not think I would have liked this man. Even the way he treated his wife. I mean, from the accounts we know, I think she was happy enough in her marriage, and he really loved her in the way that he would have loved anybody for who he was. But it's just fascinating read. I did not know anything about Vanderbilt really going into this. I learned so much more about the backstory, about the business buildup of Americas and the connection to Spain and England and France during this time. I learned about Rockefeller, Forbes, just all these other names that I had heard about, but this really gives you the letters, the conversations, the documentation of how they're connected and came together. And it's not a fast read. I would have to read a bit and then think about it and ponder it. It has lots of pictures, though. It's a great book if you're interested in that time period, or about the early ways of business, basically. I don't know that you learn a lot about the mechanics or the how-tos of transportation, but you learn a lot about the business side. Then I thought this Deb Caeretti's A Heart in a Body in the World was a memoir of a run across the United States for a cause, but it is not. It is a fiction book of a girl who has, we do not know exactly what it is that is hounding her. We know that she's got some PTSD. We know that she's had some great loss. We know that she is a fairly, good, famous in her part of the world cross-country runner. She's graduating high school and she's dealing with these issues, so she just decides she's going to run to Washington. And then it gets turned into a social media platform supporting. And as she's running, and as we're learning the little stories about her stopping off, her grandfather starts almost immediately following her in an RV to take care of her, because she is determined to do this thing. So thank goodness for the grandfather in the story. So as we're learning, there are different encounters and adjusting to this adventure. We're flashbacking to her life and leading up to the trauma that's in her life. Now, they did not get to the trauma itself until the very, very end. I would have personally thought it would have been a stronger book if they had gotten there a little bit faster and then were able to deal with processing it better or longer in the pages at the end, instead of just kind of doing the big reveal as kind of the end of the book. It kind of was less satisfying to me. But overall, I think that's a really interesting way to write, and this is written mostly to a YA audience. So it was good. It was good. I enjoyed it. And then finally, for the Fierce Reads of women, international women's, I read Violeta by Isabel Allende. I had never read this author before. I didn't know what to expect, or didn't have wildly high hopes. However, I was wrong. This is a 5-star book for me. It is in 4 different sections. It is an account that this young woman, Violeta, is giving of her entire life, kind of birth through death, and she's kind of giving this documentation back to, we're not sure exactly at the beginning. I don't want to spoil it, but she's telling an account in detail for posterity of her life. And she is born and started to be raised in Chile. She also spends quite a bit of time in America and dealing with issues going on between immigration, Cuba. You get a lot of little glimpses into the world, what's going on. It's from 1920 to 2020. And so it's an entire century, going from the Spanish flu and the stock market crash and going all the way up to the global pandemic lockdown of the coronavirus. So it is beautiful writing. It was really well told, and I personally love that kind of story where the author is talking to somebody, but it reads as if they're talking directly to the reader themselves, like you are the intended receiver of the letter. And just painting the pictures was just done in such a beautiful, profound, sweet way. I absolutely am going to read some more Isabel Allende. I'm a new fan. This is a fierce female international author. The readathon is successful in my experience right there. Boom. So thank you for stopping by, for listening to any or all of those reviews. If you have been reading something awesome in March, whether it's middle grade or mystery or mammoth or fierce read, leave me a comment. Let me know what it is. I would love to meet you in the comments. Happy reading, y'all. Have a great day.